Hi, welcome to the first week of year 3 videos. Should have been Swansea Triathlon today, but obviously I'm not there, no one is. I'm currently on the RGT platform that I looked at a couple of weeks ago and doing the final stage of the cycling podcast, Our Giro time trial, 10 miles, just warming up for it now. Absolutely no problems with it today. Seems to be functioning really solidly. So I'll report back on that in a minute. I'm going to get on with this 10 mile TT and I'll report back on how I get on. It was really hot and really hard work, and I was playing around with my cadence too much. Anyway, whatever. I think I averaged about 290 watts per kilo. 290 watts per kilo would be amazing. 290 watts for the whole thing, which is about right. It's a shame I weigh 100 kilos and not 58. In which case that would have been a much faster time. I put my sort of normal road TT bike on the turbo today, just so that I could get in exactly the right position, as I like doing the turbo sessions in the time trial position rather than sort of cheating and sitting up, really, as hard as it is. But I put the disc and the 808 on the that I normally have on this bike on my felt that normally lives on the turbo with a pair of training wheels on it, and I actually forgotten just how awesome that bike looks. David Miller put an Instagram post up this week about his felt DA and how it was his favourite bike he'd ever ridden. And it's really interesting information about how much effort he put into kind of getting all the right bits for its ceramic bearings, some kind of weird cabling setup. A really fascinating tweet, and it was actually that bike that he rode when he was at Garmin that made me want to buy my my B16, because it's the closest I'd ever get to a DA. My God, it does look cool with disc wheels on it. I have to say, it's the best looking bike I've ever been. As much as I love this, I like the kind of frame on it and everything else. That felt, it's just a lovely looking bike. So yesterday's ride on the RGT platform was way smoother than the first time. If you watch that video, you see I had all sorts of problems. It took me 90 odd minutes over 2 days, so 3 hours to try and get the platform to work last time. I literally had no problem yesterday. Got on the course to do a warm-up and then rode the ride, and yeah, buried myself trying to get that 10 mile TT in. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I think there are some really great things about the platform. I think there are some things that either confuse me or I'm not quite sure about. Lesserly being the idea, the fact that there is no TT style approach to it, where other riders affect your drafting. Now, obviously we know in the real world that you'd have to catch your minute rider to get any element of drafting in a TT, but if there are great big packs of riders riding on a TT race on RGT, you get the benefit of being pulled along by them. But that's a small thing. One of the bigger problems I think with it really is the fact that you can upload your GPX files to it and create a course for your races, which I think is amazing, but you have to be able to ride it, you have to organise a group ride and have a minimum of 5 riders ride it for you to be able to do it. And I think that's a little bit odd. There must be an architecture reason for that existing. I can't really think why that would be a thing to do, other than because it's built in for some reason or another that I don't understand, because I'm not a programmer. But I do love the platform. I think it's going to hold great promise, and definitely a challenger to Zwift when everything's kind of really settled. And I'm sure this kind of last 21 days of chaos for them really they're going to learn a huge amount from it, and I wish them all the best for it. On to like the last bit of this video, really. I'm going to talk a little bit about my training, but I'm also going to talk honestly about the things that have been going through my head. I'm going to call this section the honesty box. So for those of you that are watching last week, I did explain that my family, my direct family, are going through a really challenging time for about the next, well, between now and Christmas really. We've got some stuff coming up that is going to be a big challenge for us. I'm at that age where talking really candidly and openly and publicly is really difficult because there are some things that I just want to keep under wraps really, but suffice to say what is going on is going to be affecting my training, and that's why it's going to be part of these videos, but just how detailed I'm going to get is going to be fairly limited. But I'm going to talk fairly openly and candidly about this thing. The way I see it, there are two kinds of problem. There's the problem that you have control over the outcome on, where you can do something about it, and there are problems that you have in your life that you have no control over. Human beings love to have some sort of level of control, and it's when we have those problems more or less where we don't know how to solve them or we can't solve them that we have to be careful about how we go about gaining some kind of control. A few years back now at university, I had the most eye-opening and enlightening 2-day course for something called Mental Health First Aid, which was just absolutely mind-blowingly brilliant. I learned so much. My eyes were open, my opinions were changed on so many things. One of the topics we discussed was where people have problems with eating disorders, with prescription or recreational drugs, alcohol, self-harming, those kind of things. And the lady was telling us how you can't treat those problems. You have to treat the reason why those problems have arisen, and they all come down to control. There is a problem in that person's life that they can't control, and therefore they turn to those things because they do have the ability to control those. Now, some people turn to negative control mechanisms and some people turn to positive control mechanisms. Something like sport, going for a run, usually is seen as a very positive thing. I'm actually going to get into that in a bit of a detail in another video, because that's something else that's been crossing my mind, because I know that it's not always a positive to be going out and thrashing yourself. But there are areas of that I wanted to talk about specifically this week. One is about control and kind of just being really candid about how you go about things. Anyone that's known me from my kind of mid to late teens will know that I've had a bit of a reliance on alcohol for years and years and years. I've always liked to have a drink. I've used it, you know, to get over confidence issues and all sorts of problems that have arisen in my life over the years. Some of them have been issues that I have control over, and some of them have been issues that I don't have any control over. But it's my kind of crutch that I lean on sometimes, and to the point where 5 or 6 years ago I became completely teetotal, stopped drinking, because I knew that it would be a better way really of controlling my life if I confronted the problems that I had, dealt with them and just got through it without having that crutch. When the lockdown started, it was one of those things that I couldn't control, and I thought to myself, well, I'm just going to have some drinks from time to time. And then we hit this big bump in the road, which kind of came about in the last 2 weeks, which has found me spiraling, escalated really in terms of the amount of drink that I've been having, and to the point where I've just thought to myself, this has got to stop. I'm not a good recreational drinker. I can't just have a glass of wine. I pretty much do everything I do 100%. A bit like this video stuff that I started 2 years ago was just supposed to be a quick 5-minute video on my iPhone, and now I've got cameras and lenses coming out of my bags that are stacked up in corners all over the place, and I've restarted a production company I started 10 years ago. I can't really do anything by halves. I'm not really very good at kind of moderation and mediocrity, so the only answer really with that is just to stop drinking again. That's going to be the first thing. The control elements that I'm going to be going into are not going to be involve anything to do with drinking. It's going to be much more about being present in what's going on. I know some people kind of can have a glass of wine or a couple of glasses of wine of an evening, and I am not one of those people. So that's the first kind of thing that's happened over this last week, is that the drinking's completely stopped, and that's something that's going to be you know, for the foreseeable, who knows, years and years possibly, who knows. Right, and the other thing I was thinking about were the different kinds of training. It sort of links in with what I've just been talking about. I tend to, I mean, I do polarized training anyway. I do a lot of volume at very low intensity and a little bit of high intensity, but right at the upper end. I don't do much in the middle. And polarized training kind of seems to fit this mindset thing that's been going through my mind. To completely misquote the Eagles, some train to remember and some train to forget. What I've discovered this week is that my training polarized has kind of led to me having two kind of thought processes. The longer, slower, low intensity stuff has led me to what they call thought rumination. This is where you kind of work through problems and you think about what's going on in your life. And you can kind of really actually spend a bit of quality time focusing on them, because you're doing something relatively monotonous without much kind of focus in on it. Whereas the intense efforts I've been doing on the turbo or the TT that I did yesterday, or the run, which I'll talk about in just a moment, that were really high intensity focused efforts, are those things that actually allow you to shut your brain down from those problems for a while. And I think both of them are absolutely vital in life, where You have that little bit of time when you're training to kind of really think about what's going on in your life, and then there are those times when you just need to completely switch off. So the run that I did on Saturday was something that they call the Barkley 5k. I don't know if you guys are aware of the original Strava wanker story and how all those things came around. But the idea of the Barkley 5k was a club race that we've done again, another virtual club race, where the idea is you try and run the fastest 5k you possibly can, but you have an hour to do it. The point being that on Strava it gives you a moving time. So if you run 1 kilometer and then press stop, or you lap your Garmin and then recover for 5 minutes and then you go again for another kilometer, it will give you the moving time for those 5 1 kilometer efforts, even if you've taken a 5-minute break in between them, and it will give you a culminative time of a much faster 5k than you could reasonably do. So I thought I'd use this as a bit of a challenge this week, and this definitely enabled me to completely switch my brain off from everything that we did. I decided I was going to do 20 250 meter efforts. I decided on 45 seconds recovery, but I actually did take a lot longer as it went on, which is fine, because I had an hour to do it. The rules were, how fast can you run 5k within an hour? Had people doing all sorts of stuff, running down motorway bridges. I think even one person got their other half to drive them back up to the top of a hill, and all sorts of kind of crazy chaos stuff. And I found it really challenging. I went out at about 11 o'clock. It was starting to get really hot here. I don't know if you know what the weather's like. Well, it's all over the UK, really amazing weather. Yeah, it was an interesting experience. My 5k PB is 1908. I ran that as the first 5k of an 8k run exactly 5 years ago in the last couple of weeks. May 2015, I ran 1908 for the first 5k of an 8k, and I've not got close to that since. And I ran 2029 for this with the 250 meter efforts, yeah, it was excruciatingly hard work, but it did allow me that kind of opportunity to just completely switch my brain down. Now, I have spoken to a few other people that I know about this idea of using training for different things. I think they're both completely healthy things to be thinking about when you're training, is whether it's going to give you a chance to switch your brain down or switch your brain off completely, or whether you're going to be able to focus on the things that you need to think about. And I know people kind of often talk about going for a run helping them with working through problems and stuff like that, but the research that I've read shows that actually one of the best things for mental health and depression and those kind of problems that a lot of people suffer with is bouldering. So the sport where it's not a rope climbing, you're just on a very low boulder and you have to do very kind of low movements, and it's all kind of very close to the ground. And that bouldering seems to be the one thing that, because you're completely focused on the moment, has the most kind of mental health benefits. And I thought that was an interesting thing to read, so I'm going to explore this a bit further. This is not the end of this discussion on this. I'd really like to know your thoughts on how and when you use training when it isn't for a race. And right now that's what I'm doing. There aren't really any races left. I've got one that hasn't been cancelled yet in Exmouth in September. Who knows if that'll happen or not, but right now the training is for other reasons, and I find myself kind of deciding on what training I'm going to do based off of where my brain is at and what I need it to do. So I hope you'll forgive me that little bit of a kind of brain thing. I know that these videos were always set up for me to talk about, me and my training, and just a bit of accountability and just a challenge to see how long I could do these on a weekly basis for. They weren't set up to get brand deals or get 10,000 followers or anything like that. That was never what they were for. There's plenty of channels out there that will tell you how to increase your FTP, or why spending $1,000 on a wetsuit will be better better than a £100 wetsuit off of Amazon or anything like that. There's loads of videos out there. That's not really what this channel was set up for. Even if I do touch on some of those things from time to time, I want it to be as honest as I can be, and at the moment it's helping me, and to be honest with you, that's all it's about. Whether 2 people watch this video or whether 200, it really sort of doesn't matter. Talking through these things and making the notes that I've got does help me kind of work through these things in my brain, and they might be of use to you. I'd be interested in knowing in the comments below from you guys about what you think about that aspect of training, whether you think it's something that you use or have used or have never really considered in terms of the stuff that goes on in your day-to-day life, bearing in mind most of us aren't elite athletes where we actually do this for a job. Anyway, that's about it. I don't really know what this next week's going to hold or what next week's video is going to be like or about, but it's just going to be more of me doing some training for one of those 2 reasons, really. So I should wrap this video up before it gets too long. I could talk about these things for ages, but I kind of want to have a bit of interaction with you guys, so do put a comment below about what you think about those training things, and enjoy the rest of this week. I don't know what the weather's going to be like. Lake's being drained Wednesday and Thursday, so won't be able to swim there. Probably going to swim on the sea on Thursday. That's the only thing that's going through my mind at the minute. The rest of it is up to you to kind of make the best of your week as best as I can, and I will see you on the next video. Have a good week and take really good care of yourselves.